It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. While you're at it, go check us out over on YouTube if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. Astonishing numbers for how many people aren't subscribed. So it's free. Just please do it. Hit that red button. Leave a like on the video also if you like what you're seeing, and leave a comment if you have a question or if you just want to comment on the videos. Let us know what you like about it. Also, go check out the description of the show, whether you're on a listening platform like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or if you're watching over on YouTube. We've got several links down there from several of our sponsors. Also, at the top, we have year 7 of Rocking Around the 412. It's our Christmas fundraiser. It's something that we've done the past 6 years, raised over $32,000 with the help of everybody that's donated to the mission to help provide children Christmas for the local 724 and 412 area code. We've also partnered with the East Rochester Salvation Army and adopted children off of their angel tree as well. If you want to learn more about that, the link is at the top of the description. It's going to be there until mid-December. And so if you want to donate, you can there. If you want to share the message, please do, because we want to get as many eyeballs on it as we can to help spread the word that we are trying to help children get provided Christmas this time of year with the help of everybody. This is a Steelers show, and it's a special Steelers show because it is game week. The first game week, the first real game week, this regular season is starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is finally here. It feels like it's been ages. We've talked about football all year long without games actually happening, and still somehow we love it, even through the postseason, even through the offseason. We love talking about the Steelers football, but we finally get to talk about actual games coming up. They play the Atlanta Falcons this week down in Atlanta. I'm excited. What are you thinking about it?
What an interesting week 1 matchup. The Falcons on the road. Obviously, the storyline, Artie Smith, Steelers' new OC. He's the Steelers' OC because he was fired as head coach by the Atlanta Falcons. So revenge game week 1, and then Russ returns to Denver in week 2. Did a great job of setting up the storylines there. We're going to dive into this game, obviously, quite a bit. I just want to make a little bit of an announcement, though, because we got some more Steelers content on the way. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell when you know when a new video is posted, because we're launching a new show every single Saturday this fall during football season. Steelers Saturday Sit Down. Emphasis on the down. That's part of the title. It's not down. It is down. And episode 1 will be posted by the time you guys are watching or listening to this tomorrow. And I got a special guest joining me. Pittsburgh Steelers tight end Pat Fryermuth will be on the sit down for week 1. Very excited about it. Actually, Tyler's kind of like TBD, so we'll see if he's going to be on the show as well. Yeah. But so most of them are going to be done as live streams. But obviously, Pat will be on a plane probably on Saturday. So we got to pre-record this one. We'll see how
he might make a special instance for you. You guys got to have a
how's the Wi-Fi on the plane? Do you think you can jump on while you're on the flight? No, but I'm very excited about it. We might be able to have some conversation about something else that's happening in Pat's life. By the time you start watching and listening to this, we'll see how this conversation ages. I know last week I made a prediction. It may or may not have come true by the time you guys are watching and listening to this. This is what's funny about pre-recording these things, right? Is because you can talk about something in real time and it either ages gracefully or like milk by the time that people watch or listen to it. But I'm very excited for that. So be sure to check that out on Saturday to get you set up for week 1 against Atlanta as well. We're going to give some season-long predictions, bigger picture stuff for the Steelers. But being that this is week 1, this is, we want to kind of preview this game against the Falcons. I know Kyle Pitts was limited on Wednesday. But that's where my mind immediately goes to for the Atlanta Falcons. They have some awesome weapons, Bijan Robinson and Drake London as well on the outside. But Kyle Pitts versus Deshaun Elliott is the matchup, number 1. If you were asking me like things I want to see in this game, that's my number 1 thing. Because Deshaun Elliott was like him and Pat going back and forth throughout training camp. That was the battle to me to watch. It was kind of like the 2023 version of George and Joey going at it in training camp. That's what Deshaun and Pat were like. So Deshaun's going to have that role, and I want to see him match up with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, like I said, limited Wednesday, hamstring thing. We'll see if he's able to go. on Sunday. But that's where I turn my attention to right away. Is there something like we want to obviously talk about all the aspects of this game, but first and foremost, that kind of like pops off the page to you, what you want to see?
Honestly, that's the one I was going to bring up. I feel like because of fantasy football, I feel like Kyle Pitts doesn't get all of the respect as a player that I think he should for what he's able to do on the field. Fantasy football kind of makes a joke out of Kyle Pitts every single season, and if you draft him, you automatically are a bust. But I still think as a real life player, that's a very freaky athletic player. He's someone that is a threat against your defense, and you have to find the right matchups. And the fact that Deshaun Elliott was matching up with Pat so much in training camp, kind of prepping him to be able to match up with those tight ends, I think that's going to pay its dividends early on in this season. And even so in game one, if Kyle Pitts is playing in this game, Deshaun Elliott's going to be on him. And I think that having that experience, knowing that you're going to be following that tight end, that's something that is going to be able to lead the Steelers to success, I think, because they had that preparation early on against other tight ends. If they weren't as prepared, if they had somebody else on them, I would be more concerned about it. But I think that this is a key matchup for the offense. I mean, don't get me wrong. They do have athletes all over the field. I just think that Kyle Pitts kind of gets lost in the sauce, so to speak, which is kind of crazy to think about because of when this guy was coming out of Florida, he was like talked about as the best prospect in his draft class overall, if you were just looking at a player by the position. And then I just think it's the fantasy football stigma that has kind of like soured people on Kyle Pitts. Still a really good player. And so I think that's something that needs to be targeted for the Steelers going into this game. I think that they've got the length on the outside to hang with Drake London. I think that they've got the athleticism at linebacker to be able to shut down Bijan, or at least contain Bijan. I don't want to say you're going to shut him down all the way, but Kyle Pitts is the one where you kind of forget that he's out there, and if he gets lost in that defense, he can hurt you. I think that's going to be a big matchup.
Yeah, you brought up Bijan too. The addition of Patrick Queen to this defense and what he can do sideline to sideline, I think is going to be big for limiting him. The marriage, if you will, between Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts, I think is going to be huge for that linebacker room. Just the way that the skill sets mesh together, what they're going to do up front. I think this could be a special defense. Like, I'm very bullish on them. Alan Saunders, who does the other podcast on the Steelers Afternoon Drive, he's even more. I mean, he thinks this could be the best defense in football. And I'm not saying that I don't think that. I feel comfortable saying they'll be like a top 7 one. Like, I think that that's a very nice place to start, because I think there is some question about, the nickel corner spot, obviously, as well as like, Dante Jackson's been very impressive so far in his time with the Steelers, but he hasn't played a regular season game yet. And the biggest question with him has been health. So I think there are a couple questions to be answered on the back end of this defense for sure. But the front 7, I mean, unbelievable. And I think that you're right that I do think that they're going to be able to limit. I think that's the word to use with Bijan Robinson for sure. And then I look on the outside and they got Drake London as the number 1 playmaker. I think that I like Darnell Mooney. He's a fine player, but like there's to me a drastic drop off. Not as much as the Steelers drop off from their 1 to their 2. But there's a drop off there from Drake London to Darnell Mooney. So, and I think even body type wise, I don't know that Joey's always going to travel with number 1 receivers, but because of like the body types within the Atlanta wide receiver room, I think it certainly makes sense for him to pretty much travel with Drake London on Sunday as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you want somebody, that big, long outside corner on him, and I think that you will see him travel. I'll be curious to see what they do with someone like how are they going to handle the passing situations with if they go into dime. Like, are they going to have Beanie Bishop out there in those packages? I would suspect not. I would suspect you're probably going to see 3 safety sets or Corey Trice. So do you think that they'd lean Corey Trice over those 3 safety sets?
I mean, I think you could see both on the field. Yeah. I mean, I do think you're going to see a lot of, they call it like heavy nickel with the 3 safeties. That's what it's called. I think you will see that. I think it'll be Deshaun Elliott going into the slot. We had some conversation, like, would it be Minka? Because he's played slot corner and done it so well, even though you want him to play in the back end. Talking with Alan, talking with a couple other people, it sounds like Deshaun Elliott would be the one to get the crack at doing that. And that's where you get those matchups with Kyle Pitts, who plays a lot in the slot. But if it's like Ray McLeod, I don't know that body style necessarily matches up, the body type on body type there, the matchup that you're looking for. So it'll be interesting to see. It's a chess game. And I think that Zach Robinson, the new OC in Atlanta, who I really like, I think he's going to bring some great things to that offense, comes from the McVay tree. I'm excited about him. He actually interviewed with the Steelers, or was going, I don't know if he officially did, but he was on their list for sure. If he didn't, I don't know if he did interview or if he ended up taking the job in Atlanta before we actually got to interview him, whatever the process was. The Steelers were certainly linked to him when he was out on the market. So I think that he brings some refreshing ideas to the table. I'm curious to see how much of McVay we see within that offense. If it's the case, man, they're going to run more 11 personnel than anybody. So you're going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. You're going to see a lot of pre-snap motion. You're going to see a lot of guys getting free releases. Like, this defense is going to be tested. Like, I don't know that enough people have talked about the turnover that's gone on in Atlanta. Like, I don't know where you're at. We're not giving NFL predictions on this show. But Atlanta's my pick to win that division. Tampa won it last year. I think Atlanta wins the division this year. I'm curious to see how Kirk Cousins bounces back from that injury. But I think the defensive side of the ball can be so much better. Like, they brought in Matthew Judon, they brought in Justin Simmons. I think that side of the ball is really where they're going to see the improvement. And that's the matchup I'm more curious about, is the Steelers offense versus that Atlanta defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And before I move on to that matchup, I did want to mention, just because you brought him up, I'm curious to see how Kirk Cousins is going to bounce back from an Achilles injury. That's something that is not easy to bounce back from, especially since it happened last season. Like, I feel like even though it's been a year, that's not a big turnaround time unless you're Aaron Rodgers and you were going to play by the end of the season. But I think that I'm very curious to see how Kirk Cousins is going to operate. Like, he was never a mobile guy, but is it going to limit how mobile he can be in the pocket, moving around in there? Like, is he going to be more timid to be moving around in there whenever it comes to being in game speed? I think that's something that the Steelers, especially in game 1, you're not giving Kirk Cousins several weeks to get comfortable back there. This is the first game of the regular season, and I think the Steelers could have an opportunity to take advantage of someone that might be a little timid taking his backdrop from the center. I think that's something that they could take advantage of with that defensive front for the Steelers have. Get under his skin, get testy with him, and make sure he knows that you're coming for him, and really test out how good that Achilles is post that injury.
Yeah, and I don't think that they're the strongest offensive line up front. You know, Chris Lindstrom's a good guard. Caleb McGarry's an okay tackle. Like, but they're not a great group up front by any means. And we just talked about the Steelers pass rush and their front seven and ability to get after their quarterback. I think they're going to push to get back. Remember how the Steelers were first in sacks in the NFL for all those years? We've seen that drop over the last couple. I think they're going to be back in that conversation in 2024. On the offensive side of the ball, this is where things get really interesting. We know how much attention George Pickens is going to get in the passing game. See how much Pat and the other guys are going to be able to take away from it. Who's going to match up with Pat? Is it going to be Justin Simmons? Is it going to be Jesse Bates? I mean, what a safety duo that they have there in Atlanta. Is it going to be one of those guys that, Pat primarily sees? Is there a third guy in the pass game that you think can step up? Is it more just about the running backs? Like, how do you think the Steelers offense is going to attack this Atlanta defense?
I'm not sure, because I'm not even sure how the Steelers offense is going to operate, period. Doesn't really matter against the Atlanta defense. Just overall, a ton of new stuff with this offense. I think that they're going to have to air the ball out more than they probably would like to in this game. I think that Atlanta's front could shut down a timid offensive line early on, because I don't think that there's a lot of cohesion with that offensive line yet. A lot of new along the offensive line again. Zach Frazier being brand new. You're not going to be having Troy Faltano, but you do get probably Spencer Anderson in game 1 on that left guard spot. So you're going to get some new guys there. I think that you're probably going to have to pass more so than we would have thought as far as the schematics go, how the strengths are of this team. And I think that they're probably going to do a decent job of covering George Pickens. If you're taking him away, Pat is your second target. But like you mentioned, with that safety duo, that will make it interesting for the Steelers to see how they expose that. And unfortunately for them, they don't really have the wide receiver room to take away a lot of the attention off of those two guys. And outside of their safeties, I don't think that their corners and anything are nothing like spectacular as far as like shutting down the Steelers. but I just don't think that the wide receiver room overall is something that the Steelers are going to be able to take advantage of those corners. I think that you're looking at something like Van Jefferson would have to step up big in this game because I think that you can see the key on George Pickens, the key on Pat Freiermuth. Someone like Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin would have to step up and be a contributor. That way you're not as, I guess, tunnel focused on those two players if you're the Falcons.
And what's the confidence level in a guy like Roman Wilson, who we didn't see in the preseason at all? Didn't even have one full day in pads. Like, if he is physically able to go, the injury report on Wednesday had him limited. Pretty good that he was able to do anything on Wednesday. That's the day where, the heavily padded practice of the week, they do the most amount of work. So if you're dealing with something, you'll either be limited or non-participant. Troy Fautanu, Roman Wilson, Corey Trice, Jalen Warren all get in limited work, which bodes pretty well. We'll see how tomorrow goes for them, but they're trending in the right direction there with those guys being available. But yeah, I think it's interesting that that Roman Wilson could potentially just jump right into this game and have a massive role. I don't know that I would predict that to happen, but I think there's a world where it does. I think, like you said, much more likely they're going to have to rely on a guy like Van Jefferson, or maybe to a lesser extent Calvin Austin, but I really think it's going to be the George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth show. George Pickens out of the gate. And listen, I love the player, trust the ability, think he's still going to get his. AJ Terrell, Pat Surtain, who just got paid in Denver. Those are his first two matchups, week 1 and week 2.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because I think he's going to be keyed on by both those guys. Like we said, Joey Porter Jr. is going to follow Drake London. AJ Terrell is probably going to follow George Pickens in this game. He's going to have his work cut out for him. Doesn't mean he's not going to get his, but it's going to be more earned from his view, so to speak. I think that even though I want the Steelers to be able to run the ball in this game, I feel like they're going to have a tougher time to run the ball. I think that Atlanta's linebackers and the front seven is pretty stout. And I think that while that is probably the strength of the offense, I mean, don't get me wrong, it is the strength of the offense overall looking at the wide receiver room. But while you want that to be the strength, I think in week 1, it may not be as strong as the Steelers would like. And so they're going to have to focus in other areas.
Yeah. It's just so interesting to me, the dynamic of that room. I thought they needed to upgrade it more than they did. I'll be honest, practice squad additions, I don't know that we've talked about those. Ben Skoranek, I'm actually kind of intrigued by the addition of him as a practice squad guy, because he played all 5 phases of special teams. He's a really good blocking receiver, even did some H-back stuff. Him and Brandon Johnson, who had the familiarity with Russ in Denver, probably a reason Zach Azzani and Russ wanted him here. To me, they're probably not the 2 worst receivers on the roster, despite the fact they're not on the 53 right now.
Yeah, I'm surprised by a lot of the practice squad decisions overall. And we talked about that last week. I'm intrigued by Ben Skoranek. That could be an NFL caliber player that you have. I mean, he did some good things with the LA Rams, and I don't think as far as capability standpoint, like if you switched him out for Scotty Miller at some point, or he made the NFL roster, I don't think that is out of the question. But I think that overall the practice squad has surprised me for the Steelers. Have they done anything about quarterback, like bringing in another guy yet? No, that's so surprising to me. The one that we talked about last week, Jaron Hall, he signed with who was it?
I actually don't know.
He signed to somebody's practice squad. Seattle Seahawks. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. When I read an article about Jaron Hall and the fits, the number 2 of the top spots I had for him were Minnesota and Seattle. So.
That's an interesting spot for him. So they got Geno there, Sam Howell, and then him. Is there another quarterback on the roster besides those 2 and him?
I don't know. Let me see.
They might only, because some teams only carry 2 on the 53.
Yeah.
So.
Which do you think the Steelers will ever get to that point again, carrying 2? I mean, they had to find one in order to have 2.
Yeah, and your starter's not going to be 35 plus years old.
According to the Seahawks depth chart, they only have Geno Smith and Sam Howell listed.
Okay. Yeah. I think a lot of teams are kind of going that route with just the 3rd guy in the practice. That's why it's to me, it's not weird that the Steelers don't have a practice squad quarterback. You don't have to have one. They typically bring one in week dependent. So if they want a guy to emulate, they'll probably bring a guy in for Ravens weeks for sure, to try to emulate Lamar. Although you have Justin Fields. So I don't know if that's necessary. never mind. That might not have to happen this year. But they've done that in the past. So we'll see if it's like a case-by-case basis. But that'll be interesting to watch as well. Like I said, we want to get into season-long, bigger picture stuff. But your prediction for this game, Steelers-Falcons week 1, how do you think it goes down?
I feel good about the Steelers. I really do. I know that there's a lot of hype around the Falcons that we talked about, like maybe an underrated team going into the season. A lot of changes that they do, but I feel good about the Steelers mainly because of the defense. I believe in their ability to shut down the big players from Atlanta. Like when you talk about Bijan, to talk about Drake London. Well, speaking of Drake London, one thing I will say that I'd want to see earlier on in the season that they kind of figured out, but through the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season last year was a recurring problem, even if the defense had a overall good outing. Don't let one guy get so many yards every single week. Like I felt like last year, the first 5, 6 games, they had one guy beating them so often. And I get it. Like if you're going to let one guy get his, but overall you do a good job as a defense, that's fine. You end up winning the game. That's fine. But I just felt like there was a number one wide receiver every single week that was getting his on the Steelers. And like I said, if the Steelers end up winning the game, it is what it is. But I would like to at least see more limited from the receivers. I'd like to see improvement from the cornerback room in that aspect earlier on this season. So just to see that, like Drake London is the one that is, as far as a receiver goes, would be that type of player to get that. But I mean, like we mentioned, Kyle Pitts kind of gets lost in the shuffle a lot of times when you talk about Atlanta. I feel like he's a forgotten player. He could easily be that type of player in this game.
Darnell Mooney had a year in Chicago where I thought like he's a legit wide receiver too, at least.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that you can just put up your nose at this Atlanta offense, but I do believe in the Steelers defense. I'm bullish on them as well. I think I'm in between you and Alan. You're saying easily top 7. He's saying they could be the number 1. I think that they're going to be a top 5 defense. I think that the additions that they had, and then seeing what some of their additions did in the preseason, like you said, Dante Jackson, we have to see what he does in a regular season, but we saw a lot of good signs compared to what we thought we were potentially getting whenever they traded for him. And Deshaun Elliott has looked good. Getting Patrick Queen, I feel like that's going to be a game changer for this team. And I should have played the ad. That was a missed opportunity to play the game changers ad. But I really do think it is going to be a game changer.
This one? What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I'm wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. And they have a Patrick Queen design on there, which I have, and I'm very excited to rock this season. So go check that out. Go check out many of their designs. New NFL pack just dropped, 50 plus new designs in the catalog. Use code AT412 at checkout. Save yourself $10 on that. Wait, did you say so you think the Steelers are going to win? Did you say score? Okay.
I didn't say a score. I do think I feel good about the Steelers. I do think they're going to win. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I don't think that it's going to take I think it's going to take the Steelers a little time to ramp up offensively, still really find their stride.
Okay.
I'll put a score on it of I'll say 23-17 Steelers.
That's literally the number I had in my head. But for the sake of not being the same, I'll say 23-16. So I'm taking,
how do they get to 16? I want to know how. If you're taking off
a touchdown and 3 field goals.
Okay. There you go.
Did you 16? No, but literally I was sitting here, I was like 23-17. And then you said that. So it's basically like it's Wheel of Fortune. I'm betting a penny or whatever if you're going high, and I think that it's gonna be lower.
Yeah.
My total's lower. All right, so let's get into some bigger picture stuff. We do this every year on the episode that we put out right before the season. Going to give you team MVP, offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year. I threw in a most improved into this category as well, and then a team record for the season. So I don't know. Some of these can be boring when you have. Some of these can be boring year after year, just saying the same player. I think the results speak for themselves, and we'll go back and forth because I don't want to say like one of us to get the same guy every single time and ruin it for the other person. So we've seen the results with him on and off the field. There's nobody else to me that can be the MVP other than TJ Watt. Like he is until he's not.
Yeah. I think it's a tough argument to say anybody else on the team. Offensively, might as well just close your eyes and not even think about it. There's nobody on that side that I think is going to be MVP. Like you would have to have a massive season from I just don't see it from either of their running backs because you're going to be splitting time. And as much as I would like to see it from somebody like George or Pat, but Pat's also a tight end. So like how much like does that weigh into like what he could do to be named MVP? Realistically, offensive side of the ball, it'd be a quarterback. I just don't see that happening. I don't see it at all. And defensively, while there's stout defensive players like we were just talking about on that side of the ball, it's hard to beat TJ Watt. Arguably, sure. Like we're saying MVP of the Steelers, like year in and year out, going into the season, he's going to be one of the top candidates for Defensive Player of the Year. So it's really hard to beat that when you're comparing him to the other players on the defense.
Absolutely. So is he also your MVP pick?
Yeah, he is my MVP. Quick, easy, get out of the way.
I think everybody in the comments will probably agree. If you have maybe an outlandish, I feel like that can almost be the word thrown around. If it's anybody else, again, the results so far in his career have speaking for themselves when he's on and off the field. So he's the MVP. Offensive Player of the Year, I'll let you go first this time.
Offensive Player of the Year, I feel like this may be a surprise to some people. I'm going to go with Pat Freiermuth.
What a biased pick.
It is a biased pick, but I do think that the stars have aligned in a way that it could happen.
Yeah.
I think that you look at the backfield, if Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren were just the number one running backs and they didn't have the other on the roster, I think there's an easier path to one of those guys being the offensive MVP. I think that they're just going to take too much away from the other. I think it's going to be too much of a split backfield for either of those things to happen. George Pickens, easily your number one receiver, easily your number one target. But I think that what we talked about a little bit last week with him being that number one target after not getting a Brandon Ayuk or not signing anybody else in that time frame to take targets away from him, but also not take away attention from the defense away from him. While I still think he's going to get his, I think he's still going to have a good season. I just think that it's going to be harder for him to have as much of an impact like he could have had if someone's taking away that attention from the defense. And when you look at the rest of the wide receivers, it's out of the question that there's no chance that anybody else is getting it. And I don't think that either of the quarterbacks are going to get it. I would be really surprised if one of the quarterbacks gets it. Like they'd have to play really well, which, don't get me wrong, I'd be pleasantly surprised because that means the Steelers offense would probably be pretty good. But I think Pat Freiermuth, the stars have aligned for him to be the offensive player of the year. You look at the type of offense that you got with Arthur Smith. I think it's really good for him to succeed in. You look at how they're going to have more targets to him, not just because he's an important role for the player, but they didn't improve the pass catchers. They don't have a ton of opportunity behind him for success in that role just because they didn't add a lot of talent. So if you're looking at Pat Freiermuth by himself, he is tight end 1, but he's realistically pass catcher 2 on this team. Yeah. Could be pass catcher 1 if George gets targeted or just gets covered enough by the defense. I think he's going to have a big year. I think he's going to have double-digit touchdowns. I think he's going to be a big red zone target like he should have been from the beginning. And I think that he's going to excel in this new style offense.
I went with one of the running backs. Jaylen Warren is my pick for Offensive Player of the Year for the Steelers. And now you mentioned the volume, and that's very fair. 100% get it. We don't know how they're going to treat this backfield. You can kind of go with one of two mindsets, right? Like, are they going to run the wheels off of Najee because they know this is the last year that he's going to be around? Or do we see them transition the offense more to Jaylen because they know that he's the guy they're going with in the future? I could see subscribing to either train of thought there. I think Jalen's a better fit for the offense personally, without obviously seeing that come to fruition yet. That's just how I feel about it right now on the surface. And again, even if the total volume numbers don't match it, I just think when we look at like efficiency, play-by-play basis, we're going to sit there at the end of the year and say this was their best player on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that too. I think that Jalen Warren is going to be not only driven because he's splitting time with Najee Harris, but like they know he also sees, and we talked about a lot how Najee Harris is motivated because he didn't get that fifth year option taken up, and he's not getting a new contract with the Steelers. I feel like that in a way that also motivates Jalen Warren, knowing that
Jalen needs a new deal though too.
He needs a new deal.
He's going to get one, but it hasn't happened yet.
He needs a new deal, and if you're Jalen, you look at that, what happens with Najee, and you're like, well, that means there must be investing in me. They believe in me enough that I'm going to be their number one guy too. So
yeah,
I think that's a good pick.
Defensive player of the year. Oh, by the way, we added the caveat we could not pick TJ Watt for this. Like if we were assuming we were picking TJ Watt as the MVP, we didn't want to also pick him for defensive player of the year. I'm curious to see if because of that, we also have the same person here. I'll go first this time. Patrick Queen is my pick. And the reason being, and I mentioned this when we acquired him, I just think he fixes so many things for this team. Like more so than just the linebacking room itself. I think he's going to let Minkah get back to doing a lot of things that Minkah was doing, cover so much ground. I think it's more so like he impacts all three levels of a defense when you have a guy like that at that spot. I don't think, and I know that we've thrown this name around when searching for the next Steelers linebacker for so many years, and we haven't found it. But this finally feels like it is them being able to replace Ryan Shazier. Like just with the athleticism that he brings, being able to stay on the field for all three downs, there's not something that he's bad at. Like there's certainly like parts of his game where you're like, there may be some questions in coverage. Sure. I think he's very good in coverage, but are there some limitations? Potentially. I don't know that we've had a guy like this actually, I know we haven't had a guy like this at the position since Ryan Shazier. But I don't know that we are even fully grasping how much it's going to impact not only the linebacker room, but the defensive line in the secondary because of the ground that he can cover.
Yeah, if you were watching on YouTube, you saw me put my head down. I have the same player. I do. I think that Patrick Queen is too obvious of a pick, if you want to say that phrase, after TJ Watt, because of what he's going to bring to this defense. And I echo everything that you just said. The Steelers have not had this type of linebacker in their room since a guy like Ryan Shazier. They haven't had a guy where you clearly go, that's your Mike linebacker. Like that's your number one linebacker. That is your guy over the middle of the field. They've had some good guys in the linebacker room, don't get me wrong, but you haven't had someone like Patrick Queen where you say this is their guy back there. Someone that can cover the field like he does, the athleticism that he has at the position. I mean, we're talking about a second-team All-Pro last year, coming to the Steelers to play defense. I don't think that is something that you turn your nose up at. I don't think that's something that you forget about. He is going to make an impact from game one immediately for this defense. He's the reason alone why I think that you look at all the other additions that they had, Dante Jackson, Deshaun Elliott, those are good additions, but he is the reason why I think this defense is going to be a top 5 defense.
Speak to Deshaun Elliott. We talked about this on Steelers Afternoon Drive. We didn't have this on here, but I'll put you on the spot right now. Do you have like a bold prediction for this team? Mine was that Deshaun Elliott will double his interception total so far in his career. He only has 3 picks so far in his career. I just look at the secondary of this defense, trying to figure out like the way that they're going to line him up, teams avoiding throwing Minkah's direction. I think it's set up for him to have that type of ball production.
Bold prediction. We're talking season long, not this game.
Sure.
Okay. Season long, I'll say, well, I kind of said it already. I don't know if it's bold or not, but like I think that Pat's going to get double-digit touchdowns. I think that he's going to have.
I think that would be career high 7. So
like career high 7, I'm thinking like 12, 13.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I think even if he gets 7, that's depending on what the yardage and receptions are, like that's a solid season. But
Yeah.
if he gets that, I mean, you could be talking about him playing in the Pro Bowl, assuming that the team's not preparing for the Super Bowl. So that would be big. Okay, Rookie of the Year. I'll let you go first this time because I went first.
I didn't know who I'd go with at first because I thought like maybe Troy Faltona will play into it. But I think when you look at, and this is something we talked about so much this season, the importance of the position in the new offense, and he's going to be starting from game 1. Zach Frazier is going to be the Rookie of the Year for the Steelers. I think the main thing is the first thing I said, the importance of that position that's going to play a key into the offense. Your offense ebbs and flows with a lot of things, but in an Arthur Smith offense, the success of the center plays a lot into your success of your offensive line and success of your run game. I think that he's going to have a major impact right away. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there'll still be a little bit of growing pains in game 1, but I think as the season goes along, he's going to be really good, play at a really high level. He's the most pro-ready player at that position that I think coming out of the draft they had. If they were drafting one of the other centers, I think the Zach Frazier is the most pro-ready to like be ready to go week 1 like he is right now. So I'm happy in that scenario, and I think that he's going to be really good with the Steelers. I think Troy Fautanu, he was another option that could potentially be there, but just because of the importance that center is going to have on this offense.
Yeah, Frazier's my pick as well. To be honest, I didn't see it happening like this, though. And here's the thing, like, we expected them to draft a center, like, going back to the end of last year. But we wouldn't have predicted that Mason Cole was going to be cut and that also Nate Herbig would suffer an injury. Yes, Mason Cole, one of the competitors for this spot, cut. Smitty from around the 412 here, and while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app The Cut, book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. So, like, not only do I think he's going to be good, they need him to be. Like, what does the offense look like if Zach Frazier isn't a very good player for them right away?
I don't think you can run the ball that well. I think that if the middle of your offensive line is not good, I don't think that they're going to be able to successfully run the ball. That's going to make them very, very easy to defend against.
Yeah. I mean, every part of it. Like, he had some snap issues at times, this summer. And I don't know, are those going to rear their ugly head early on? He's so important for this 2024 team. And I think he was going to be anyway, but certainly the Nate Herbig injury didn't help the matter. So, I think he's the Rookie of the Year for both of us for that reason. I don't know. Like, I know a lot of people are high. I'm high on Peyton Wilson too, but it's more about 2025 and beyond than it is in 2024.
I thought about Peyton Wilson. I just don't think he's going to see the field enough to make me the Rookie of the Year. Unlike Frazier, where I think that he is starting from game 1. I think he's going to stay that way the entire season. And even Troy Fautanu, while he may not start at some point in this, or like to start the season, at some point, I imagine he's going to play himself into a starting role. And I think that he would immediately have a bigger impact than Peyton Wilson, just because I don't think Peyton Wilson defensively is going to see the field as much as Steeler fans are going to like him to.
Yeah, and who knows about Roman, with him suffering the setback that
he's the wild card in all this. So. He's the one that, like, I genuinely don't know what to expect this season from Wilson. If you asked me on draft night, I thought, man, this is a good wide receiver 3 on this team. We'll see what he plays into, see what the Steelers were adding at that point. Like, he could be the wide receiver 2 on the team. At this point, I'm like, is he even the wide receiver 4? Like, I guess, like, pedigree early on, but I don't know what to expect from him based off what we've seen.
Sure. Absolutely. Most improved player. I'll go first on this one. And it's funny because I don't know where you're starting the bar at. because he was good as a rookie. He didn't play all that much though, and I'm not sure how much he's going to play this year. But I think they're going to find ways to get him on the field. Nick Herbig, most improved player on this team.
Okay. Phew. We do not have the same player, so that makes me feel good. But I do like that pick. I think that he's been really good. I mean, he is a preseason All-Pro. I feel like that needs to be established
gold
right
jacket.
now. Yeah, gold jacket preseason player. And hopefully he sees the field enough to get some snaps just because of the talent that he has and like relieving some of those guys. Hopefully he doesn't have to see the field because of injury. But I like that. Yeah. I think he's a really quality player. I think that he does a lot of good things, a lot of versatile moves from the outside. And I think that's why he has so much success at the size that he has at the outside linebacker position, just because of the moves that he can pull off on some of these guys. He's not just a bull rush guy.
Like guys a lot of guys talk about getting skinny. He just is.
Yeah.
Like he just is skinny. So
he doesn't have to think about it. I like that pick. I'm curious to see how much he'll play. Maybe he'll play more whenever they can.
Do you remember back in 2020? So we had Highsmith on the roster. Bud Dupree was still here before Bud got hurt. Like the game that Alex Highsmith got, picked off Lamar Jackson, it was kind of like put him on the map.
Yeah.
They all played over 50% of the snaps. And I think that they're just going to find ways to have all three on the field. I think you have to. I think that they could, rush him over the center at times, almost use him as like an off-ball linebacker as well, which is what a lot of people thought he was going to do in the NFL. So I think there's going to be definitely packages where all three are on the field.
I like that. And I think the question that you posed, like, where do you set the bar when it's come to like most improved? Like, there's a few guys that I could see being most improved. Though, like the one that, like, if I look at my offensive player of the year pick with Pat Freiermuth, if he has what I said, where he's like 12 to 13 touchdowns, 800 plus yards, like that would definitely be a most improved player in my eyes. But I'm going to go away with that just so I'm not picking the same player. And I think the bar is already pretty high for the player that I'm going to pick, but I think it could go even higher.
Watt, wow.
Yeah. He's going to actually win another defensive player of the year instead of losing it again. No, I'm going to go with Keanu Benton. I think that Keanu Benton is so talented. He is so good in the interior of that defensive line. And I don't think the Steeler fans realize how good he is. He is the future defensive lineman for this team. Like right now, if you're talking about a core of a defense for the future of this team, he's one of those pieces. And I believe he has that talent to be that good. I think that you're going to be talking about Keanu Benton after this year in potentially being like going into 2025. Is this guy a Pro Bowl player? Is this guy potential all-pro play? I think he's that good. I think he's going to have that much of an impact at his position. And I know the bar was already high with him because he had a good 2023, but I think just because of the jump that he's going to have because of his skill and his talent in 2024, that's why he's most improved. And I will add another one that I thought about considering. If Russell Wilson has a good year, I think it's easy to give him most improved as well, because a lot of people are down on Russell Wilson.
It is funny to think about like a guy in his mid-30s though, most improved. And what about Justin? Like if Justin gets on the field and looks good,
is he going to though?
No, I'm saying if that
Justin is way easier to win that award than Russell is.
Yeah,
but man, I don't see the path right now. Like I knock on wood, don't want this to happen to anybody, but right now, I think it's taking an injury more than anything. Mainly because I think that the offense is a lot more QB safe than other offenses is.
Sure. We both picked rookies from the 2023 class that were drafted out of Wisconsin. Yep. And also, Keanu Benton was very good last year, but only had one sack. So, like from a production standpoint, definitely could see that climb quite a bit. So, and then finally, of course, record prediction for the team.
I'll let you go first because I don't know if I'm where my bar is at. Like, I don't know what my record is at as far as expectations overall for people go. So I'm going to let you go first.
It's funny because anytime somebody has asked me this and I say what my answer is, they're like, oh, that's what they were. But you think they're a much better team. 10-7 is where I still see this football team. I think despite the fact they were 10-7 last year it looked very different. It took like them not seeing Joe Burrow, not seeing Lamar in the last game of the season. Like it's just how they got there. I'm not trying to take away from them last year. They were 10-7. They got in the playoffs despite the QB carousel that they saw. I think they're going to be a much better 10-7 football team this year. Still see them falling into that bucket though, whether it's because of the strength of schedule that they have, especially in the back end of the schedule, the way that it lines up with all the division, Kansas City, Philadelphia, all in that same group. They're on the back end. They're going to have to get out to a hot start this year for this prediction to come true. That's kind of the way I see it. I think they're going to win 10 games, be right on the cusp of a wild card.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to go first, because I didn't know how bullish this prediction was. I have them going 12-5. Yes, 12-5.
12-5 with this schedule would be like,
even with the back half of the schedule that they have.
To me, 12-5 with this schedule, we should be talking about Mike Tomlin as coach of the year.
Yeah, and I'll break it down for you too. Before the bye week, I have them at 7-1. I the only loss when I was going through the games, the only loss I said was Dallas at home. After that, I have them splitting with each of the divisional teams and then losing to Kansas City, and that's the 5 losses. I think because of how good I think this defense is going to be, and don't get me wrong, the offense has to play well too to get them to 12-5 for sure, because we've seen over the last several years that offense plays a lot more differently than it used to in the past. Offense is a lot more required than it was in the past. But because of how good I expect this defense to be, I think that it's going to, like it has in the past several seasons, keep them in games. But I think that the offense is going to be improved enough to win more of those games that you didn't in the past. And I think that your defense might even just win you some of those games like they do. Like there's always a game or two where the defense wins you the game outright as well.
Yeah.
And they're going to have some of those. So maybe it's bullish. Maybe I'm too high on them, but 12-5.
When you set, like the way that you set that up and started talking, I thought you were going to say 11-6, like, one win better, which I think still super impressive, but 12-5 would be awesome. So winning the division, does that win them the division this year?
I don't know, because I have them splitting with each of the divisional opponents. So I'd have to look at the other schedules for the divisional opponents to really decide whether I want to. I mean, I think it would be at 12-5. I think it'll be a toss up between them and Baltimore for who would win the division.
Interesting. Okay. I said we weren't going to do like full NFL predictions, but just the way that since we're talking about the division, I have the Ravens winning it. I didn't have an order on the wild cards. I think the Steelers get in as a wild card. I'm debating if I want to put a third team in there. I need to see Joe Burrow come back from this. I need to see what he looks like, because that wrist injury is not something, it's not a common football injury. We haven't seen somebody do it. What is he going to look like? I know that he's, in the preseason, he's participating in training camp. I have to see it on the field in the regular season to know what we're working with. In Cleveland, it's just, man, last year almost seems like a miracle run type thing that happened with them. I believe in the defense for sure. Obviously, I don't believe in Deshaun Watson at this point. We're so far removed from that. But I don't know. I just think that there's so many questions, and I'm not saying last year was like 100% a fluke, but it almost seemed like there was just so many things that went right for them, despite so many things going wrong, if that makes sense. Like horrible injury luck, but also like if that happens again this year, I wouldn't predict Joe Flacco to play the way that he did.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know. How do you see the whole division shaking out? Yeah.
If you put me at gunpoint and if I had to pick, I would say Baltimore 1, Steelers 2, Cincinnati 3, Cleveland 4.
Okay.
At 12-5, that might win the Steelers division, but
yeah,
I just think out of the division, they definitely have the hardest schedule. And if I think they're going 12-5 with that schedule, then Baltimore might end up winning a game or two more. But going into week, I don't even know what this would be, but without them playing a divisional opponent, going into their first matchup with a divisional opponent against Baltimore, that home game on November 17th. I currently have the Steelers at 8-1 going into that game.
Be riding high, sitting pretty. I don't even know if he would be playing all that well, but people would be talking about Russell as MVP. Just because, like, in 2020, people were talking about Ben that way, just because we were undefeated.
Oh, that was the most Mickey Mouse cupcake 11-0 I've ever seen.
I'm just saying. But anyways, let us know your thoughts on how the Steelers are going to do in 2024. Would love to see you guys do that exact same thing, that rundown that we just did in the comments as well. Anything else you want to add?
Nope. Football is back. Here we go. Next week, we're going to be talking about a game.
And be sure to tune in to Steelers Saturday Sit Down. Me and maybe Tyler sitting down with Pittsburgh Steelers tight end Pat Fryermuth right here. So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you guys know when that is posted. Very excited for that. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else. I'll put that out as a podcast as well, which will be, I plan to do that anyway, but now I'm sitting here thinking to myself about it. And most of those are going to be live streams, which means like the questions are going to come directly from the comments in real time. So will that make sense to put as a podcast? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If you're an audio listener, shoot us a DM or go to YouTube for this, just a comment and let me know if we should put that out as a podcast as well. Obviously, with Pat being on here, I'll put that one out. It's going to be like Q&A. But going forward, what you guys think about that as well. Very excited for this new project as well. Just more content for you guys to consume. Very excited about that. I'm as excited about football being back as anybody. And I'm very excited to dive into this and do more content. So follow us everywhere at Around the 412 on everything. Also check out the links in the description. One of those links, our friend Haley Wagner, small business, everything custom designs. Need a custom t-shirt, hoodie, tumbler? Stop what you're doing. Don't go anywhere else. Check out the link in the description. Everything custom designs. Our friend Haley Wagner, small business. She can do all that for you. She even does Around the 412 merch, t-shirts, hoodies, long sleeve tees, bunch of different stuff. I even got a tumbler from her as well. So go check out the link in the description. Goes directly to her Facebook page. All of her stuff can be found there. Again, everything custom designs. Haley Wagner, she does great work. Can't recommend her enough. Go check it out. Included in that is our merch, Around the 412, direct link to that. I'm wearing a hoodie right now. It's not an Around the 412 hoodie, but just to point out, it's starting to get into that type of year, or type of season. Sorry, not type of year. Type of time of the year to wear hoodies. So hoodies, long sleeve tees, t-shirts. We also have shorts from our guy DC4L Customs in the description as well. And then we got Game Changers shirts, gamechanger.la, pick6.la. Save yourself $10 using code AT412. And most importantly, no shade to any of our sponsors, but most importantly, Rock Around the 412's link is in the description as well. Year 7, raised over $32,000. I think they would agree with that, though. I mean,
of course,
if they didn't, they're terrible people. Every single penny donated goes directly to helping provide Christmas in the 724 and 412 area codes for children that otherwise would not have that type of Christmas, whether it's local families from the school districts or helping out the East Rochester Salvation Army through their Angel Tree program. We've been doing this for now 7 years, and we're very excited to really dive in this year. September is the month where I feel like it starts ramping up, probably because of it being football season and just the juice is going. People get more giving when they're in a good mood. So download GoFundMe or go directly to the site, donate right there, share it, do all that good stuff with it. But that's all we got. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Steelers show. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.